What's up, everyone? It's Matt Mrozik, and next project on the bench will be this 1/4 scale custom Spider-Man, and this was produced by Xionart. This was a kit that I purchased several years ago, never got around to it, and someone asked me if I would be willing to paint it up for them. I was like, sure, why not? So, and typically, and what happens, like if someone buys a kit that I personally own, they want me to paint it. Because right now when I do jobs, I don't take a deposit. I just wait till the piece is done, and that's when I collect my fee. But if it's a kit that I own and someone wants to buy it and have me paint it, what I do ask is that they buy the kit, send me that fee, so then the kit belongs to them. And then when the paint is done, then they send me the paint fee. So like when she wanted to buy the kit, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to sell a kit for this, so send me that now. And then when I'm done painting it, that's when you send me that paint fee. So that works out pretty well. So this is a great piece. I love it. It's a nice sculpt. The quality's pretty good. Xionart, if you don't know, they get some bad blood. There's some history there that I don't know about with the producer and stuff, so I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know about it. But I've just heard some history and with that group, or with the not the group, but the producer. But this is a 1/4 scale Spider-Man hanging from a lamppost. And overall, it's a really cool looking piece. The one thing you'll notice that the scale of the lamppost is off. It's not 1/4 scale, because if they made the lamppost 1/4 scale, it would be crazy tall. And that, at one point they had it taller, but to save on just space and everything, they shortened the lamppost. But I think the concept's nice. So we have Spider-Man hanging from a lamppost here. And overall, the quality's pretty good. I'd say Xionart kits are probably like, you know, on a scale from 1 to 10, the kits are probably like a 7, maybe an 8. And I'll get into it more on this particular piece, but like for example, on this one, some of the spider webs are not well defined, really on the shoulders and stuff. But it's not going to matter on this one because we're converting this to Symbiote Spiderman. So the majority of the work on this piece will be sanding off the webs and the spider logos, because I have to smooth it all out. And then I'll create masks for the white, I guess, spider, or I guess, I don't know what you call it, but the white spider on the front and the back, and then the patches on the hands. So the majority of the work will be sanding the spider webs off and getting this guy smooth. The only thing I'm not going to sand off are his eyes. We're going to keep those because they're well defined. But to get this into a symbiote, I got to get rid of the webs. And then smooth them out. Okay, so yeah, so I gotta smooth them out, and then I'll create the logos on the front and back with tape. Same thing with that on the hands. He has one switch out, and it's his left. Actually, it'd be his right hand. This is right hand. So this hand comes out, which is shooting a web, and you can put this hand in. Oops, sorry. Which holds the camera, which is kind of cool. The one downfall about this, the camera sculpt isn't the greatest, but you get the idea. One thing else I'm going to do for this to customize it is I'm going to 3D print a news dispenser, like a newsstand or newspaper dispenser, put that on here. Another customization. The light does light up here, but the battery's been dead for quite a while, so it doesn't turn on right now. But it's a decently bright. It's not crazy bright, but it's bright enough for you to see it during the day. And people may ask, well, is he too heavy to hang here? No, because he's hollow. So he comes off like this. So he's pretty light. Even though he's hollow, I can tell it's well casted. But I have to go through and get rid of all these spider webs, sand this down, sand all this down. So that's going to take a while. That's going to be the majority of the time on this piece. And then I haven't talked about paint a lot with my client, but we'll talk about that more when I get closer. Let's see what else. And then the way this comes off is let's see, let me get a light up here. So this is magnetized, and there's a hook here, and that comes off. Another thing, one thing about this that I need to work on a little bit is maybe the fit of this little piece. It's okay, but it does kind of get pulled on a little bit. And then As far as the way the kit breaks down, this comes off here, and the base is a solid piece. Get the lamppost and Spider-Man. So let's do some quick measurements on this piece, and then I'll start working on them a little bit here. All right. Let's see. Okay. So width-wise, it's not real big. We've got the bottom of the base here, so the width is 15.5 inches. The depth, which would be the front of the lamp post, or the back of the base to the front of the lamp, you're right at about 12 inches, maybe 13 inches. And then the height is all the way up to the top of this. Is going to be 30.5 inches. So that's where you're if you're concerned about space, would be the height. 30.5 inches. But overall, it's a nice piece. I like the sculpt. The sculpt on the base is really nice. They did a good job replicating the sidewalk with some cracks and stuff, so that'll be fun to weather up. I'm going to print some news clippings or newspaper things and put them in the put them on or around the newspaper thing. Maybe I talked to my client, maybe putting some like on the lamppost, like the wind's blowing. I don't know. We're gonna play with this a little bit and have some fun. But yeah, the majority of the time will be spent sanding Spider-Man. So I'm gonna set up and we'll start doing some sanding. Okay, so we're gonna start sanding on this guy, and I'm just gonna show a little bit because it's gonna be the same process over and over again, just on the whole piece. So I've got a variety of sandpaper grits, and I'm gonna start off with 180 and see how that does. I don't want to go too coarse because that's just more repair I gotta do later. I also need to see if I need to keep this little web shooter that's sculpted in. I have to look at some of the reference photos she sent me of Symbiote, but basically we're gonna go in here and we're start sanding these webs off. It's actually a good thing that they're a relief web rather than recessed, because of the recess I have to go in and fill them in all with putty. I think it's easier to sand them off than to fill them in. So this has been primed by the factory in white primer, and you can see as I sand that where I need to sand more, there's a white kind of outline of the spider web. So it's kind of like a sanding guide. Now, guarantee once I get this all sanded, I think I'm done, I prime it, I'll see areas I gotta sand, so I'll probably take 2 rounds of sanding and priming at least, maybe more. So today is all about sanding and getting this as smooth as I can before I do the first round of primer. So on a day like this, I just throw on Lord of the Rings trilogy or something like that, because it's just going to be nothing but this. And some of the little areas that are tough to get on, I may have to get a Dremel. I really don't like using a Dremel because it's really easy to go too far with it. So I prefer hand sanding. Even when I used to paint cars, I never liked using mechanical sanders because it's really easy to do too much. So another thing I gotta be careful is I don't sand any flat spots on the muscles. I gotta keep them nice and round. So when I want to get into a crease of a muscle, I just fold my sandpaper a little bit and get in there. Like so. And this is what we're gonna do all day today. We're gonna sand. Hopefully, knock on wood, I can get this sanded down with the first round of sanding and primer done today. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. So I'm gonna pause here, continue sanding, and when I get to a good place, I'll show you where I'm at. Alrighty, so after about an hour and a half, I got an arm sanded down. It looks pretty good. So I did go over the Dremel ever really lightly in some of these little crevices on a really low RPM. So I've got two bits. This is a pretty like fine as far as like coarseness, and this is a little harsher. So I go in with this guy, if I real lightly. If that didn't work, I'd go to the slightly coarser one and get in there. So, and I also did use some 180 grit sand, or not 180, 180 grit to go in there and initially get the webs off. First I was doing 180, but I was going really slow. So I went in with 80 grit, sanded it down, went in with my Dremel a little bit here and there, and then slightly going over with a 180, and then I have a super fine sanding sponge here, and just giving it a good sanding, just to kind of help get rid of some of these deeper sanding scratches. So when I go to prime, hopefully everything will get filled in real nicely. And the primer I'm going to use is probably an automotive lacquer primer. It's a high build, high filling primer. It's automotive grade, and it sands really easily. So. But it's lacquer, so it dries pretty quick. So I can spray on 1 or 2 good coats of it, and I should be able to wet sand it down. Start sanding it an hour or two after I spray it, and then go from there. So this arm is done. So this one took me about an hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, so this one is before and this is after. So we're going to continue sanding. The hard part is going to be the torso, because getting in like all these abs and everything, that is going to be a nightmare. I'll have to use a Dremel to get in there. And it's just because this is all one piece. I really wish this arm came off, because it'd be much easier to sand, but the torso is going to take a long time. So I'll keep sanding and come back when I'm at a good spot. Alright, well, I'm going to call it a day today because my fingers are raw from sanding all day. Sanded about 9 hours on this guy. So we got the hands done, the legs are pretty much done, this arm is done, the head's done, and now it's just a matter of getting into the really hard areas. So because this is all one piece, there may be a few areas where I just physically can't sand the webs off. And it's really like behind the arms here, behind this arm. I can't. It's really hard to get sandpaper back there. I'm going to try. And maybe back in this area. So I'm going to do my best to get it all off, but there may be a few areas that I just can't. So I'm going to do my best. I've actually gone in here with the Dremel and real lightly kind of taking it off of here in the abs. It's looking good. I'll really know how good it is once I get a first coat of primer on there, but yeah, so we're slowly getting to the Symbiote. I probably have another 3 hours of sanding, I would guess, before I can throw some primer on this. So I need to get my fingers a rest. They're raw from sandpaper, but it's getting there. It's getting there. So we'll continue this sanding on this guy tomorrow. Alrighty, so woke up this morning, spent some more time sanding on this guy to smooth him out a little bit more. Really had to work on trying to get in here in the abs and behind this arm. There are some areas I just can't get to. One area is like right here in the back of this hand, but you're not going to see it, so I'm not too worried about it. And I told my client last night I'm going to do my best to get as much as I can, but some areas I just physically can't get to because he's all one piece. I briefly thought about breaking this arm off so I could sand that out, but then that just requires a lot more repair up here. And like, you know what, that's not worth it. That would add a lot more time and a lot more work. So I think once he's all together and everything, it'll be fine. So sometimes you have to do that, especially when you're doing a conversion or something like this. You just have to, you know, what can I do to make it look its best? And that's where I'm at right now. So now it's ready for the first round of primer, and I know I'll have some more work to do. I never prep a kit, prime it once, and it's ready to paint. There's always additional steps. So I'll probably have to go do some putty work. A couple areas that are standing out that I know I'll have to do some putty work is one right here. This was a crack, and this happened in the factory because you can see where they puttied it a little bit. So it's interesting because you can see where the factory has done some work to the piece. They've done some putty work right here, a little bit here where they joined this arm on. So when they casted this arm was separate. Looks like the upper torso was separated from the legs because you can see the putty work right here. And so yeah, I mean, it would have been great. You know, I got this as a kit, but it would have been great if they would have kept this arm separate. Just my opinion. Let me deal with putting that together. The good news was that this wasn't painted and then primed over. A lot of times when you get a kit on these custom pieces, the factories are lazy, and what they do is they paint everything, and then if you order a kit, they just simply prime over it, which I don't understand because it creates more work for them and costs more materials. But for whatever reason, they just don't say, hey, we have 5 kits in this edition series, and put them to the side. They paint everything and prime over it, which sucks for painters because what that does is it fills in details. And then, because you have their primer, then you have their paint, and then you have their second layer of primer to cover up the paint, and then you have your stuff, so it just fills in details. So luckily this wasn't one of those where it wouldn't have mattered anyway because I sanded most of it off anyway. So this has all been basically sanded with 180, and I went over it with a sanding sponge of 320 to get most of the sanding scratches out. So some of the putty work I still have to do is like the whole crack. I may have to go do some in some of these areas where I took the Spidey logo off, where I can see where it's kind of, I could keep sanding, but I'm just going to really obliterate the sculpt. The sculpt on this is fairly simple. It's not like a Franco Carlissimo sculpt where it's like they went to the nines with muscle detail, which is, thank God, because if this is like a Franco sculpt and I had to take these spider webs off, I would obliterate the sculpt, you know. So it's a fairly simple sculpt, which actually works well for Symbiote Spidey. And all the references I've gotten are basically drawings, which the drawings are simplified. You know, they're not like hyper realistic, so that's good. So I think this is a perfect piece for this type of conversion because the sculpt is simplified. Like, there isn't muscles on top of muscles on top of muscles in the abs. It's really, you know, there's a six-pack and that's it. And you get the side here with the ribs. So some areas where I may have sanded a little too much to get the spider webs out, I'll just replicate the look of the muscle with paint, and I can do that really easily by adding a highlight and shading. I do that a lot actually. I'll go in, if there's a muscle I want to bring out a little more, I'll just accentuate it with the shading. So we're still discussing colors as far as how we want to do this, if we're going to do like black with blue undertones, or it's up to my client. All the illustrations are basically black with blue highlights. So I sent her a photo of the Venom I did, and she'd mentioned it's a little too blue, which is no big deal because I can always just blend that blue in a little bit more. So I can control how much blue undertone there is simply by how much I blend it in on top. Once I do I usually do black, then I do the blue highlights, and then I blend black on top of that, and just how much I blend that black in determines how much blue is in the piece. So it's really relatively easy thing to control. Just have to keep kind of knocking it down until we get where we want. But it's looking good. So I'm gonna let this dry. I gave it a bath, scrubbed it with soap and water, and I'm gonna let it dry. And then for the first round primer, I'm just do a rattle can Krylon, and that'll give me an idea of what more sanding I do and what putty work I got to do. And then so once this is primed, I'll come back and we'll take a look at it, because it's going to be, again, probably another full day of sanding. So I anticipated at least 2 days of prep. I spent about 9 hours yesterday, a couple hours today, so right now about 11 hours of just sanding to get the webs off, to smooth them out. So I was anticipating about 20 hours of prep, and I'll probably be right there, maybe a little bit more. So when we come back, he should be in gray primer. Alrighty, so I primed everything yesterday in Krylon primer, and we still got some work to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here with some wet sandpaper, 400, and I've got some soap in the water. It just helps lubricate the sandpaper and everything. And we're going to start sanding these down again, and try to smooth this out a little bit better. So I got a couple areas that I need to address, but I kind of hit this pretty heavily with the heavy sandpaper, so I want to come in here with something that's not quite as aggressive and just kind of smooth things out. So again, another round of sanding, but we're going to do wet sanding this time. Basically anything I see like this, like that little spot right there, we're going to sand that out. And we're going to try to get this as smooth as possible. So when I put this primer on, it's just a pretty light coat. I just did like basically 2 light coats of primer, knowing that's not really, I'm not using it to fill the scratches. I'm just kind of using it as a guide coat to tell me where I got more work to do. And if there's any really deep kind of little pits, I'll use some spot putty on those. So wet sanding and using 400 is not very aggressive, so it's not going to take a lot of resin off, but it'll hopefully smooth things out nicely. And then I'll do another, if I find a pit or something that's just not, I can't sand out without doing damage, I'll put a little spot putty in it. And then sand that smooth. So again, just when you do something like this, it's just a lot. It's just tons and tons of sanding. So it's not exciting to watch. So that's why I don't record a lot of it. Let's see, I got these little marks right here, and come in here, roll the sandpaper up to kind of fit in the grooves of the muscles, and try not to do as little damage as possible. Again, luckily the sculpt is fairly simple. There's detail, but it's not like overly sculpted, so which is good for this kind of thing. So I'll probably spend the day getting this all wet sanded. And then doing another round of primer. And then again, it's just sand and repeat until you get what you want. And I put a towel down because it gets really messy really quick, and just to soak up the water. Like right here, I've got some pretty decent, again, that's just from the webs and stuff. And also, I've painted one other Xionart kit before, and it was the Flash. I did it a couple years ago, and it took a lot of prep. I mean, I thought it looked pretty good, and then I did a round of primer, and I saw a lot of little imperfections in the surface. I spent, you know, a good day and a half just prepping that kit. So the Xionart stuff, I mean, the sculpts are pretty good. I've never seen a pre-painted piece, but their stuff is on the less expensive side. But I think it again in most cases you get what you pay for. So I think there's some pretty good sculpts. I just think the fact that they use is on one of the lower ends as far as quality goes. So, you know, if you're going to paint yourself, I think you can get a really good result. I know a lot of guys that love their stuff, but again, it's at a price point that's more affordable than other custom groups. So it's kind of like icebreaker designs. They've got some decent sculpts, but again, they're on the lower end price range. But again, they're trying to make sure that they're trying to accommodate guys who don't want to spend just an absorbent amount of money on their custom pieces. So they have a market there, and then there's guys that like their stuff and they can afford it, so it works out well for them. So I'm going to continue wet sanding, and then when I'm done, at some point, we'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm just about done wrapping up the wet sanding on this guy. It's taken probably 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, but we're getting towards the end, and I think it's looking pretty good. He looks pretty beat up right now, but basically I went in, sanded with the 400 grit sandpaper, some super fine sanding sponges, using those wet, and also an ultra fine sanding sponge wet, and just, you know, making sure I try to get out as much of the little imperfections as possible. So the one area I think so far the only area I know I need to do any putty work is right here where there was a little crack here at the factory, and they fixed it, but they do a very good job. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just kind of wipe this spot dry, and I'm going to put a little filler on there, body filler, and then we're going to sand that down, and then I'll give it a really good bath and hit it with another coat of primer. Now the areas that I just can't get to sanding wise, excuse me, the palm of this hand and right behind this, right in this area, I just can't get sandpaper back there. I've gotten it as best as I can, so I think it'll be fine, especially once everything's painted and he's on the stand. You won't be able to see that. There is a few little webs I just physically can't get to without breaking the arm off, and that's, like I said earlier, I actually contemplated doing that, but then that would just create a lot more work, and to be honest, that much extra work I don't think is worth the that little bit of area that you don't see. The only way you can really see it is if you look up through his crotch, but you cannot see it at all. He's hanging, you can't see it from the sides, so I think it's okay. So sometimes you just have to, like, okay, the only way to do something is to create a lot of more work, and for that little spot, I think we're okay. So I think this is looking pretty good. The only way to tell is really to get another coat of primer on it, but let's do this little bit of putty work I gotta do here. So again, I'm just gonna need to dry my hands off, and I'm just gonna use a little automotive filler here. I don't need a whole lot. It's a small area. I should be able to take care of this one application, I think. And let's get just got a little spreader here. Like that. Just grab a piece of cardboard and the hardener. Let's open this up. Again, this is just automotive body filler, same stuff you'd use on a car. This is the Bondo brand. Bondo is just a brand name. I say this in all my videos, but it's auto body filler. So Bondo is just the brand name. Because I don't think I need that much, so I'm just going to mix up like this much. Oops. And sometimes the hardeners kind of get separated in the tube, so you got to mix it up a little bit. So I just squeeze it out and basically water came out. I'm actually putting quite a bit of hardener here just so it cures pretty quick. So as of now, this whole piece has been wet sanded with the superfine sanding sponge is about 600 grit sandpaper. So I'm hoping, we'll see, that once I put another coat of primer on it, it's good to go and I can paint tomorrow. I'm not going to paint today. I need to get again, my fingers are freaking raw from sanding all damn day. And even in wet sanding, it actually makes them more raw because you don't feel it till later. It's basically like you're a couple hours later after you're done. It feels like you've got burns on your fingers. So I'm just gonna. This is a real sloppy application of this, but it's okay. So typically I'd spend more time spreading that out. I made a little bit. Let's see. Make it a little smoother. You can smooth it out pretty good before you start this, and then your sanding time is reduced. But when I used to paint cars, I would mix very little hardener in my body filler, and I spent a lot of time applying the body filler to get as smooth as I could, and it would just reduce my sanding time. Alright, so we're going to leave that. That'll dry in about 5-10 minutes. Then I'll sand it smooth. And then we will give this another bath. And I'll continue just to look at little areas that I think need some sanding. Like the arms look pretty good. There is still some primer on there, but what I'm really looking for is if there's any like definite signs of webbing, and I'm pretty sure I got like 99% of the webbing gone. Like I said, the only spot I can't get to is behind that arm, but this looks, I think, pretty good. It looks really rough right now because there's no, it's been sanded, but once there's primer on there, that's when you get a sense of things. But I think this is going to look pretty good, and fairly confident that after I sand that spot and just do a little more refining on the sanding, I can do a last coat of primer and then paint. So once this dries, we'll come back and sand it and go from there. Alright, so this feels dried for a while. I'm going to go in here with some 180 real quick and do a quick, just a rough sanding of this spot. And we'll follow it up with 220 and some 600. This just gets the majority of it off and kind of gets the rough shape. It's actually not 100% cured yet. Alright, those are the rough shape. This is actually 240, which is fine. Let's go with progressively finer sandpaper, so this is some 240. I'm just going to sand real light. Trick is to get a nice feathered edge so you don't see the putty work. I'm not putting any pressure, I'm just letting the sandpaper do the work, so I'm not pushing down on it. Right now I'm just trying to make sure I get a feathered edge. It's feeling pretty good. Got a little excess right here that I don't need. Get that out of here. Okay. That looks pretty good. It feels good. I got a little spot right here. Got to feather a little bit more. And now I'm just going to go in here with some of this wet sandpaper and finish it off. Hopefully that'll be a good repair, and once I prime it, you'll be able to I usually don't wet sand filler, but this is just a small spot. It feels good. Yep, I think we're good. Okay. So next, go give this a bath in some soapy water and throw some more primer on it and see what we got. Okay, so next day, primed this yesterday, and overall we're looking pretty good. This is about as smooth as I'm going to get this thing. There are a few little spots I need to go in and do a little bit of putty work, so we're going to do that. So like for instance, I got a pinhole there, and it's just from sanding. You bring out pinholes. Some little spots I'm going to put some spot putty on. I need to sand this spot a little bit more where I did my little fix there. Yeah, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go in with the Bondo Glazing putty right here. And I'm going to just kind of put some of this in, some of these little areas that are still bugging me a little bit. And we're going to let those dry and then prime it again. And then I'm going to start painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this video up just by applying the putty. I'm not going to show you sanding and priming it again because I'm going to start painting today. I'm going to start working on the base while the putty dries. So, yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Lots of sanding, lots and lots of sanding. So, so for the spot putty, it's pretty simple. I just take a little bit on like on a stick. Now, I got to kind of get the little plug out of here because this dries up. This air dries, so I usually take a little bit and then close the lid back up because it starts to dry as soon as you take it out of the tube. And like here's like a little pinhole here, and I'll just put a little bit in there and wipe away most of it. And there's like a little discrepancy here. You want to put this on as thin as you can. And there's a little one here. Let's see what else. Right here. And I like to let this dry for at least, I don't know, it says, 20 minutes or so. I like to let it dry for like an hour, just to be safe. So I'm just pushing it into any little pinholes I see. And then I'll go back and sand over it with the sanding sponge. Because this stuff sands super quick. And then we'll do one more light coat of primer and then we'll start painting Spidey. But I'm gonna, while this dries, I'm going to start working on painting the base. I've got to print, we're gonna add a couple things to this thing. We're gonna add a little newspaper dispenser, which I'm gonna 3D print, and like a little stack of newspapers. And I've ordered I'm gonna print a stack of newspapers and to see how that looks. And then I also ordered off of eBay, there's a guy that makes 1/6 scale newspapers. Now I know that this is 1/4 scale, but the newspaper dispenser I'm printing closer to 1/5/1/6 scale because it would be really big on the base if I printed it 1/4 scale. Like, it would dominate the base. So I'm gonna make it a little smaller to kind of fit in with the lamppost, since the lamppost really isn't true 1/4 scale. Because again, if it made a 1/4 scale, it would be really, really tall. It would have been, I think they said it would have been like 30 inches tall or something crazy. I don't know, actually like 48 inches tall or something crazy like that. I'm not sure how tall a lamppost is, but... Alright, so this is a little messy right here, but that's okay. This stuff sands pretty easily once it's dry. So again, I'm just kind of hitting anything that really kind of stands out with the putty. Because as you sand resin, you will reveal air bubbles many times. So taking the webs off took almost twice as long as anticipated. I thought I'd get it all sanded out in about 10 hours after it's been about 20 hours. 15, well, maybe not 20 hours, maybe 16 hours of sanding and wet sanding and priming. So, yeah. It took 10 hours just to do that first sanding. So I just underestimated how long it would take. And part of the reason is because that arm is attached, which made it much more challenging to get to areas. So again, I'm just going to go in here and I'm just looking for anything that really sticks out, that's really obvious. Chances are I'll probably miss one or two little things, but if I'm not seeing it here, you probably won't notice it in the paint. Again, my work is not perfect, guys. I do my best to get things the best I can, but it's not perfect. Again, it's like you can I'm just seeing a bunch of little pinholes that kind of popped up from sanding. So I'm just going to force, when I do this, I really push it into the pinhole. Because if you don't, you're just going to trap air in the pinhole, and you go sand, the pinhole will pop back up. And then on him, I've got quite a few little areas I got to address. So there's a pretty good sized pinhole right here in the back. painting wise, what I'll do first painting is I'll paint kind of the areas on the chest and the back, and the hands are going to go white. And I'll do all the shading for the Symbiote logo and the patches on the hands. And I'll let that dry overnight really well, because I'm going to mask over it then and then spray the black. Just some areas here that could use a little bit of smoothing. So I'm just gonna again, this is a Xionart kit, so this isn't like these super high-end, you know, kits that we get from some producers. This is, their stuff is kind of on the lower end, but I'm trying to put some lipstick on this pig. So I was chatting with my client last night, and we were talking about colors. And one thing she mentioned that she didn't like about the stock paint was that it was kind of boring. And if you look at the stock paint job on the base, it's actually not terrible. I think it's a good start. Again, what factories do is they don't spend all the time going in and really adding a bunch of detail and depth to the paint. They do like a base coat and then a little bit of shading, and then they're done. They're not going there doing washes and dry brushing and all that stuff. They're trying to get it done as quickly as possible, but still have their clients like it. So I'm just looking over this. I saw some stuff last night. I should have gone over it with a little pen last night, where I saw some areas that need to work and marked them. They're pretty good. Bubble on this finger here. So I'm going to call this video done, and this is just a prep on Spider-Man. There's nothing exciting. Sanding, and more sanding. But to do what my client requested, that's what it takes. So on the next video, which I'll start recording here in a little bit once I get all this putty applied, we'll start working on getting the base painting, because I can get that painted while this putty dries. And then I'll show you, I'm not sure if I'll show you, I'll show you the print files where I'm going to be printing for the newsstand. Or maybe I'll just wait till it's after it's printed. It's still cold. I'm in Texas, so we went through that huge storm last week. So like last week on Monday, it was like 10 degrees. Today it's going to get to 65. So welcome to Texas. It's just it's crazy here, man. It literally changes seasons within a week. It'll change seasons in a day. I've been here when it was sunny and 65 outside 1 minute, and then literally within 2 minutes it's 40 degrees. You know, a cold front comes through and it drops 20, 30 degrees in minutes. It's crazy. But that's Texas for you. They always say if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. And it's very true. So I'm just going through. Again, trying to find any pinholes. Here's one under the chin. Again, just kind of pushing it in there so that it doesn't trap air. I'm not very neat when I put this stuff on, because it gets 99% of it gets sanded away. The hardest part to sand is right here in the chest. It is really tough to get in there. Again, there's some areas I just physically can't get to. But I think it's going to look fine once it's all painted. Little pinhole there. Not sure where this water is coming from. So that's it. We're going to call this work in progress done on Spidey. And then next time you see him, we'll throw some white paint on him. But I'm going to call this one done. And the next work in progress, we'll start throwing some paint on. So as always, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.